So this podcast, we're talking about education, just our experience with it, what we think about it, blase, blase, blase. But to start off, let's kind of talk about how we have perceived or approached education throughout time, like pre-K, if you remember pre-K, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, post-grad. Like, how have we approached education throughout time? What role does education play in your life? Anyone, feel free to go first.
For me, education has always been something that was very centralized in my household. It was always deemed as important and emphasized. My mom, even during the summers, we would have like circle time where she would get us workbooks and like different learning materials, and we would still keep up with like everything that we learned from the school year and also just other things that my mom would add in. And I don't know, I've always remembered loving school. Like my mom will always tell the story of when I was young, she would drop my brothers off and I would just be there in my little carrier and I would be like, I want school. So she put me into like daycare early and everything. But yeah, I've always just loved learning, whether I was reading a book, whether I was watching a documentary or going to a museum. It was always just something so central in my life. I remember like my 10th birthday, I didn't want to party, I didn't want to hang out with friends. I wanted to go to a museum. So I went to two museums with my family in Philadelphia. It was like the National Constitution Center and then the African American Museum, and that was my day. I had the best time ever. And I remember there's a picture. It'll be up on the screen. I was posing with the founding fathers. Like they were like, statues, and I'm there like this. And of course, I was 10. This was before I had the big revelation about systemic racism in America. Half of these guys owned slaves. But I was 10, so I was just happy. I was like, these are the people who made the Constitution. I was just really happy to be there. So I've always just loved learning and taken that approach with it. And my mom was also very instrumental in like introducing, okay, what are your passions? What would you like to do? Well, you could go on this career path or you can do this. And so by 8th grade, I knew I wanted to major in journalism. I knew ideas of what I wanted to do. I knew I loved history. So originally I was like, I'm going to major in journalism, minor in history, found film in high school. So history kind of got booted out. But I've just always loved learning and education.
Period.
Nice.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I always loved school. I think I'm like the only one in my family that did. My sisters, quote unquote, bullied me a lot about it. Like, I was the nerd slash geek. Like, I was always reading or writing. I like documentaries too. Like, that, I loved history. And so I feel like starting out, like when I was really young, I loved learning. I think I was just always really curious. And when you're a kid, like, the answers to your curiosities come from adult figures. And so when I was able to read a book or like watch a documentary or whatever and like be able to learn for myself, I always got really excited. And I still do. But I think around like maybe like middle school, like right before high school, I just went to a really competitive school, or I was surrounded by really competitive people. I don't really know which one. Um, but it kind of went, school became a place where I was trying to get the best grade. Like, I had to get the best grade. I had to do the best I could. And I didn't want to be number one. I just wanted to be like in the top though. And so I worked really hard. And at a certain point, it was just so overwhelming and I got really anxious. And I know we're going to talk about teachers later, but I have to acknowledge my junior year A-Push teacher like turned everything around for me. And A-Push is AP US History, but just A-Push for short. But I was not, it was the first class I wasn't doing well in. And history was my best subject. History was my absolute best subject. And then it was like the first time I ever failed a test in my life. And so he would stay after school with me every day. He would teach me different ways of like analyzing the reading, different ways to talk about cause and effect, different ways to communicate what I'm learning. And then my grade like soared to an A again. But with all of that said, if it wasn't for him, I think I still would have been stuck going into college in this competitive mindset of like education is to be the best instead of like what it used to be, which is me just loving it. Like, I used to just write and read all the time, nonstop. I just could not stop doing it. And then I became competitive and I was like, okay, let me be the best. And then I met Mr. Edwards and he switched everything for me. So I got into college. I started off double majoring in history and psychology. I switched my major 5 times in college. So it started off at history, and then it was like psychology, and then I did history and psychology, and then I did multimedia storytelling, and then I kind of switched to journalism, and then I went to human services studies, which is where I ended up. I just stayed there finally my sophomore year, which is basically just like social work and nonprofit work and therapy all wrapped into one is human services studies. But I stayed there because I think I just really liked, well, this gets, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to stop there. But that's it. What about you, Shreya?
Looking back when I like pre-K, I think I really enjoyed school early on. Up until second grade, I really enjoyed school because I was excited to wear the backpack and wear that uniform and get on the bus and go to school. So after I got over the fact that my mother won't be coming along with me to school, I was fine. My mother tells me the story as I was around 2.5 and I hadn't started speaking yet, which was a bit of a shocker for everybody. So every day I would see the bus go by in the morning. I would see the bus picking up kids and going off. And I'd get really excited. So I asked my mother to buy me a backpack, and she bought me a backpack. And I would just stand by the window saying, I also want to go. And then she's like, okay. And she put me in play school. And I didn't get to go on the bus because the school was just opposite my building. So we'd walk there. And then I was like, okay, come, let's go inside. And she's like, no, you go inside. I can't come in. And then I'd be like, what? So after I got over that, I had a great time early on. And then I think I became less serious about it in the sense that I enjoyed certain subjects or certain topics, but I wasn't always in tune with what was happening. In the sense that I would understand what was happening, but then I was very playful and I lived in La La Land. So I wasn't really all that like, oh, I have to go back home and try this out. If I understood something intuitively, I would work on it extensively because I really liked it. Otherwise, I was super curious. I would do these charts. Like I would pick up a random topic and then I would do a chart. I remember I did a chart on calculus when I was in fifth grade, which only my parents saw. Nobody else would see it because whatever I would understand from the internet, I would put on a chart and be like, see, this is a chart. So I would do that on different topics. So I was curious. I like to read. So that I did. But my relationship has evolved. Earlier, it used to be something fun, not that serious. I would study just to get the grades that I need or if I really liked the topic. And then when I went to 11th and 12th grade, or how do you say, high school, I met a couple of teachers who in a way contributed to a very negative attitude towards education
Hmm.
or a negative approach towards education where I felt like my curiosity was being dumbed down. I know that teachers are a separate thing altogether, but this is my approach. And this stayed persistent through school, but in college it started to change where I felt that even if my teachers suck, I should study. So I started studying more. And I think viewing education as a method of learning more than something that you have to do only started when I got here, when I started my master's. Because I'm here only because I want to learn. And I think that's the best approach. So it came late in life, but I think it's good.
No,
I agree, yeah.
honestly, like on the teacher's note, they do make or
Mm-hmm.
break it. A teacher can make or break the subject, the school year, the
Mm-hmm.
degree, anything. I'm grateful I've had more positive teachers than negatives, but I feel like I've had I never had a bad experience with a teacher. Well, I had one bad experience with a teacher in high school, but it's because he had my sister, and my sister and I are a year apart. She's a year older, and most teachers were like, "Oh, you're a Fatu sister," but I'm like, "No, I swear we're different," because she didn't really care about school. Like she was not into school. She didn't really care. She didn't raise her like she was just there because she had to be. So like it would be that, but then they would realize, oh, they're two different people, as we are. But it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I got my master's degree where I had bad experiences with teachers. Some of the
Wow.
teachers we had are some of the worst teachers I've had. Hand to God. Hand to God. And don't get me wrong, the degree was great. It's the best master's degree I could have gotten for myself, hands down. And I know that. The program itself, the way it's set up, I can understand how it's meant to teach us, how it's meant to and not teach us, like just give us information, but actually help us grow into these future conflict resolution practitioners, you know? Like I can see that. But the teachers assigned to do that, no. Like I feel like this was the worst year, like this past year in the program, the whole program, whatever. I feel like it's the worst year of education I've had. I feel like I've gotten dumber. I feel like I can't write the same. I can't read the same. It's taken so hard. It's been so hard for me to get back, and it's because of the teachers we had. I mean, I can't put all the blame on them, of course. Like, there's many factors that go into it, but I just feel like at a certain point I had to write for the teacher rather than the subject. And that's was really bothering me because my critical thinking, most of that energy was placed into, okay, what does the teacher want? What is the teacher looking for? Instead of, okay, let me actually critically think about this subject. What are we learning? What are we trying to get out of this? What do I want from this? How do I take past experiences and add to it? That's usually what critical thinking is, instead of, oh, let me critically think about the best way to approach this for the teacher. Now, there were some good teachers. I'm not going to say all of them are bad. But, and I say this hand to God, there was, I would say, 60% of the teachers I had, I could have done without, hands down. With that said, most of my good teachers were in high school, and I'm grateful because it was right before you, like, I'm 18, I'm an adult, I'm going to college. So I had that really good experiences with those teachers who taught me how to be like an individual, but also how to be an individual that brings my holistic self into education, where it's not just I'm there for a grade, I'm there to get an A, but like, who is Rose? How does math, science, history, whatever help, and not help, well, help her make sense of her world, help her make sense of who she is, and then how can I bring that into the subject to better further whatever research we have. I'm very grateful I had that experience when I was like 16. And then so when I'm like 22, 23, I was 23, when I'm 23 getting my master's degree and I don't have the best teachers, I still have enough self-discipline to get myself through it, to learn as much as I can on my own, if that all makes sense. Great program, not the best
Yeah.
teachers.
For me, it's kind of about the part that you said, how teachers having your sister somewhat informed initially how they looked at you. I kind of had a similar experience. I also have been blessed with mostly good teachers, good professors, even the ones that didn't have like an overly like, wow, you had an amazing impact on my life. They were maybe nothing to write home about, but it's like they didn't do any bad. They were just, they did their job. I learned what I need to learn and I moved on. I had one teacher back in high school. I'm going to be a little vague, but I'm going to still tell the story. Where the first interaction I had with her, I was a sophomore in high school at the time. And it was a small private school. So people, you know, they go in teachers' classrooms, they kiki, and it was like a small, close knit community. So I went in with my friend. I didn't know the teacher. And the first thing she said to me was, your brother didn't like me. And I remember at the moment, I was like, hi, how are you? I'm such and such. What's your name? It's like, it was, I felt like it was very weird, but I was probably at the time just kind of like, okay. Because, you know, I'm not super confrontational, everything. And then fast forward to my junior year, I was gearing up to take her AP English class. And y'all know when I'm in certain situations in class, I don't always talk and participate, which I can work on. I can recognize that within myself. Y'all know there were some classes where I would raise my hand and speak, and other times y'all didn't hear me unless it was break time. But like, that's just me. And I was the same way in high school. And so my teacher for my AP English class in junior year said, well, you don't really participate. I'm not sure if I recommend you for AP next year. And I was like, okay, I understand, but you had the choice to kind of like, you know, still go against like their recommendation. So I knew I was going to do that because that had been the class that I was waiting to take, because it was AP literature. Like, I loved books. I love analyzing texts and stories and characters. So I knew that's the one I wanted to do. In AP language and composition, it was cool, but it was like, it was more writing and grammar. It wasn't my favorite. So I guess that teacher talked to the AP Lit teacher, and she kind of started like investigating me a little bit. Investigating might be a harsh word, but she came to the class one day and she sat in, and then I noticed it, I peeped it, and I raised my hand and participated, and then she left kind of right after I talked. So I was like, I guess maybe she was here for me. And then I went and visited her during morning break to discuss me going to AP since it was against the recommendation of the teacher. And while I was there, she pretty much was like, yeah, if you don't speak in my class, I'll send you out. Your writing, it's not what it would need to be at the standard that my class operates at. And it was just a lot of, you can't, you're not good enough, you're not capable. Maybe she didn't use those exact words, but those were the sentiment behind the words, you know what I mean? And so y'all know me, I'm a little sensitive. I started tearing up, and then I think she softened up towards the end because I think she could see I was getting a little emotional. So it ended, I went out into the hallway, I walked down the hall to where my friends hang out, and I just cried, let it all out. Went home, told my mom. One thing about my parents, especially my mom, she doesn't stand for the disenfranchisement of her children. So she said, great email. Pretty much what the teacher said back was, oh, I could tell she's getting emotional. She might not have heard the encouragement that I was also saying, which, looking back, I don't think she really said anything encouraging, but benefit of the doubt, maybe I was emotional, maybe I didn't hear it. The problem was the discouragement was louder than the encouragement, which was a problem, especially you're talking to a student you don't know well. You're talking to one teacher off of his one class experience with me. And so it was kind of bad. Like, that had a real impact on me. I did take her class. The first couple of weeks were a little rough because I could tell she was watching me and her eyes were on me and just trying to see, oh, is she going to participate? Is she going to mess up? But after a while, I became one of the best students in there, like as I should, you know what I mean? And so I was participating. I could tell she liked me as a student, and I actually even ended up liking her as a teacher. By the end of the year, I took one of her electives the second semester, and I graduated having patched things over. Like, things were fine, good, and dandy. I was like, we had our rough spots, but it was cool. 6 months later, I joined the Young Alumni Board, and we were on a Zoom call discussing everything. One of my friends were on there. We were like texting on the side, as we do. She brought up said teacher, and my first initial reaction was, that teacher? And she was like, oh, you don't like Miss such and such? And I was like, she's like. And after that conversation, I like sat back and I was like, wait, because I liked Homegirl by the end of the year. Why did I feel that way? And that's when there's this Maya Angelou quote, and I can't say it verbatim, but I'm going to quote it. You may forget what people do, you may forget what people say, but you'll never forget the way they make you feel. And that's when I realized how big of an impact what she said had on me, because the bad moments, that was an instant in my junior year, in the first couple of weeks of senior year, but then there's months of just good interactions. But when I'm separated and it's been a few months, I've graduated, I'm not seeing her, I'm definitely not thinking about her. When I see her for the first time, the first thing I think about is that negative experience. And so I'm glad that it happened when I was in high school. And it's like, I'm kind of my own person. I had like a sense of self, because I know you hear horror stories about people being told, oh, you're not going to amount to anything. Oh, you're not capable, when they're so young and so impressionable. And you're still impressionable as a high schooler. But crazy. If it had to happen to me, I'm glad it happened when I was that age. But yeah, no beef, no tea towards this teacher. But yeah. That was my experience.
I have something to add to that, but Shreya, you go first about like your experience with teachers, if you have something to say.
Why don't you add? No, why don't you add first? Because
Okay.
yeah, nothing's coming right now.
Okay.
I want to hear you guys first.
It's about the discouragement being louder than the encouragement. First off, bars. Maya Angelou in the room. Like, anyway, so I'm a first generation American. My parents are fresh off the boat from Senegal. And so growing up, those first 4 or 5, well, I started kindergarten when I was 4. So those first 4 years, my parents were speaking Wolof, English, and French to me. Like, my mom will say one sentence and have all 3 languages in that sentence. And then I also had a nanny who was Mexican, and she didn't speak a lick of English. So I was also speaking Spanish. So, and then I'm Muslim, okay? So I was going to Quran class, and I started going to Quran class when I was like 6 or 7, like 7, 8, around 2nd grade. So I was also learning Arabic. So by the time I was 10, I was speaking, either reading or writing or communicating in 5 languages, 5 different languages. And so English was always my worst subject, reading and writing. And I remember I'd get my report card. I'd be really excited. I'd have three star. We had our grading scale for elementary school was, I don't know if it's the same, but 1 to 4. You'd get 1, 2, 3 star, 4 being the best. And so like for math and science, I get like a 3 star. For reading and writing, I would get a 2. Like I kept getting 2s. I could not stop getting 2s. Keep in mind, I loved reading. I loved writing. Loved it. My favorite things. And it got to the point where it was like I couldn't understand what was wrong. And I basically just thought I was a bad writer. I went most of my life up until college thinking I was just a bad writer. So anytime I wrote, I just kept it to myself. Like I just have a whole Google Doc of things that I would write. I would write scripts, I would write narratives, I would write not poems, but poems, but not poems. Poems are next level. That's not for me. And then I got to college and I'm writing. And I took this, we had to take this rhetoric class our freshman year. And my teacher, my first essay, she gave it back to me and I got a 96 on it. And I was like, all right, this is weird. So after class, I went up to her. I was like, is this right? Like, this is a grade I got? She goes, yeah, it was really, really good paper. Best paper. I was like, okay, what about it? Like, I was so confused. And even when I took AP Lang and AP Lit, like, I got B's, I think, or low A's. Like, it was a fight. Okay. It was a fight for those classes. And she's like, no, you're a great writer, Rose. And then throughout that entire semester, I kept getting like high grades on my essays. And one day, like I would go to her office hours and we would talk and she would like give me suggestions. And I explained it to her. I was like, I just grew up learning 5 languages. So my writing has just always sucked. Like there's a paper from when I was in third grade and we had to tell a story about a cat, in third grade. They're just trying to get you to write. And I'm saying like I'm writing my story, but in my sentence, I'm writing in English, Spanish, Walla, French, Arabic. Like in Arabic, you read and write right to left, not left to right like we do here. So I started writing right to left. So my teacher was reading it backwards. And then I don't know how to write Spanish.
Wow.
I don't know how to write it. I don't know how to read it. I just know how to speak it because my nanny was Mexican. So I would like be sounding out like gancho, like hanger. And I'm sounding out gancho because I don't know how to spell it in Spanish. And then I'm saying it in French and Wolof and all those things. So I went back after that semester. Me and my dad went through my report cards. My parents never told me this, but my teachers, their notes were always Rose's fluency is really struggling right now. Rose's fluency is not the best. Rose's fluency, da da da. It was always about my fluency in English. And I think that experience of like being, or I guess like perceiving myself as a bad writer and reader and just communicator simply because I knew many languages really hindered me in my ability. If I had that teacher I had my freshman year of college and high school, I would have been in all the writing clubs. I loved writing. I always used to write scripts. I always used to write papers, letters, everything. But I just thought I wasn't good enough, so I just kept it to myself. Little did I know I was just too smart. I just knew too many languages. That was the problem. And so my sister, a year older than me, when she was in third grade, they put her in ESL. And so the way ESL worked at my elementary school was they would take you out of one of your classes, math or science, whatever. They would put you in ESL. Sometimes they would take you out of recess. They would put you in ESL. And so first off, the social stigma that came with that, like, oh, you're dumb. You guys aren't smart. Like, oh, you guys are foreign. That would come with that from the kids. But then on top of that, the teachers treated you like you were dumb. Like my sister's teachers didn't put enough effort in. When she was in ESL, like they weren't putting in enough effort to teach her English. They kind of just was like, okay, there's no hope. They'll get there eventually. Her actual teacher wasn't putting in enough effort to teach her the math that she was missing out on. So my parents found that out. My parents also don't play about the, as you said, the disenfranchisement of their children. I don't know what you said.
I don't even know if that's the proper usage of disenfranchisement.
I was like, that's facts. So my parents took Fatu out of ESL. And then when I got to third grade, they recommended me for ESL, rightfully so. Okay. They had every right to recommend me for ESL. And they said no. So I just had to struggle. Fatu had a little bit of help with ESL, even though there was the stigma, even though teachers didn't put as much effort, she still had a little bit of help with it. I just had to struggle on my own, and I didn't know why, because no one talked to me about my fluency. They were just like, you're right, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. For the most part, it was bad. And then my parents, I realized now looking back, they kind of just started speaking English in the house. Like, they still speak Wolof, but like my Wolof isn't as good because we respond in English. Like, My younger sisters don't have that same struggle. The three younger ones, they're fine because by the time I was in third grade, my parents already started focusing on English more than Wolof and French and all that. So that's what I was thinking about. Like what'd you say? Discouragement was louder than the encouragement. Yeah, like the discouragement.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't one teacher like saying you can't, but it was the whole system. It was the way ESL was treated. It was the way no one told me about my fluency problems. It was the way people said, "Oh, this isn't good," instead of being like, oh, "You did this incorrectly." Tell me I did it incorrectly, I'll do it correctly. But telling me it's not good, like I don't know. It's a weird experience looking back now. And now I have a blog with y'all. Like, girl, come on. Are your
Sure.
are your
What
thoughts
about
on your
you?
forehead now?
Yeah, sort of. Hearing what you guys said, at least a bit about the way the Maya Angelou quote that you said struck a chord. Um, as well as the fact that discouragement speaks louder than, or at least from what you get as discouragement was louder than encouragement. I think, well, I have to be fair and say that growing up, not all my teachers were terrible, right? It's not possible that I had all my teachers. No, some of them were really nice. None of them made a personal impact on me, but they did their job fairly. They were kind. And they just had 50, 60 students in one class and they took care of 4 classes. So I get it. You can't give personal attention to everyone in that case. And the education system does not support that. So I understand. So I had a lot of teachers who did their job well, who were kind, fair, and yeah, they didn't make an impressionable mark, like how you said. How did you say it? All right? How did you say it? You said
How did
something
I
like
say
all
what?
right. They're all right. How did you say that?
They're all right. Nothing to write home about, but they did their
Yeah,
job.
that they I. So that applies to most of my teachers as well. It's just some of them. I think after the third grade, I didn't have any teachers who personally took an interest in me or saw any potential in me. In the sense that there were teachers who were all right and they did their job and they went away. They didn't have any personal equation with me. And then there were teachers who may not have any influence on me but said some things that stayed. And I can remember this one time. So in the third grade, I was like really active and I was like bringing up these reports that I would write and I would give it to my teacher. And then they were really encouraging. I think two of the most encouraging teachers I've ever encountered in my life were my class teacher, or rather homeroom teacher, as you guys call it, homeroom teacher. She taught us EVS, Environmental Studies, and which is basically science and geography and all of that put together. And my maths teacher, they were honestly the most encouraging teachers I've ever met. I was really bad at maths, like really, really bad. And then she would take time to teach me after school. Told me to come to school over the weekend so that she could teach me sums and help me understand how to do things. So really kind. And I don't think I've had an influence like that afterwards. Nobody kind. And yeah, I have lots of horror stories. I don't want to share all of them. It would take up too much time. um, I think the problem was microaggressions, which were considered acceptable, or people didn't really think much about it. Like for example, when I was in the fourth grade, I was depressed because I was shifted. My section was shifted, so I wasn't with any of my friends, and I was with new kids, and that was unsettling because I'd moved the previous year. I'd moved from Dubai to Bangalore, India, and I just settled in, and then I was shifted again. So I was maybe a fourth grader in like minor depression, maybe, I don't know. And then I was really quiet in class, which was not something that I usually was. And then during the first parents teacher conference, this teacher tells my mother, and I'm sitting right there, oh, I heard great things about her. And I heard that she was exceptional, but I think she's just ordinary, below average. And my mother was shocked, and I was also I was really young, so I had no idea what she was saying. And then she was like, yeah, but she's just average. And then I was like, okay. And yeah, so that's the only lasting impression I have. And then as you grow up, you see teachers who'd glare at you, who'd stare at you, or who'd make that sharp retort. They're not directly saying that, oh, we think you'll amount to nothing, but they're showing it in small gestures and actions that it just stays with you. And I think at that point onwards, I started viewing myself as someone who was not talented or who's incapable of doing things. And being fair, I probably gave them enough reasons for it because I was like dreamy. So to be fair to them, they're like, where is this girl's head? Why isn't she in it? And yeah. So I think, yeah, microaggressions. Apart from a few teachers who actually said and did mean things, microaggressions speak a lot, especially to someone who's emotionally sensitive. because then you're more attuned to what kind of emotions you're receiving from the other side, I guess. So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
Facts.
I lost the plot. Yeah, sorry.
Lost the plot. No, but that makes sense.
Yeah, like
Everything you said.
yeah, like the fourth grader was just the start of my fourth grade teacher, homeroom teacher. She also taught me science, which is yeah. I think that's where it started, the bad experiences with teachers. And then I think I've just been unlucky and I have not been able to understand how to behave in a certain situation. But yeah, to summarize that, most of them were really nice. Some of them really made an impact on me. Some of them left me feeling like, what did I do wrong? I don't even understand what I've done wrong. I was just confused. I was like, okay, I get it, but what did I do wrong? Like, I don't understand. Help me understand. And sometimes when I think back to that time, I get really agitated. I don't know what I did wrong, even now. Yeah. I think the important thing to note is that to all these teachers who teach in these factory schools in India, to them their student is just one among the thousands that they'll teach in that year or in that half a decade, or one among the thousands of students that they'll teach in their entire career. But to that student, you're the only sixth grade teacher they'll have. You're the only teacher who's taught them this subject at this period of time. So you will always be there as a part of their memory. Either you'll fade away because you were all right, or you'll stick out because of these negative impressions. Or if you make a positive impact, they'll always remember you. Like, I still remember my third grade teachers because they were great. And I still remember the horrible ones because they were horrible to me. And I'll probably not even be a figment of their memory. They wouldn't even recognize me because they've taught so many kids. It's just that the impression that you make on children it has a lasting impact.
It does.
You said something that was good, or made me think. You said, like, you didn't know how to behave in certain situations, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always get really defensive when it comes to like younger kids, like literally anyone in K through 12, honestly, because we're still learning and we're still growing. And sometimes I think we're put in situations where teachers aren't prepared for that. I genuinely think that I can only speak for America. Well, I can honestly only speak for North Carolina specifically. But I don't think, dang, I just doxed myself. just,
There.
just, just beat that. I do not live here. I do not. Anyway.
Let's just cut that out. Start
No,
over.
I
Cut that out.
completely.
Start over.
It's a conversation. I forget this is recorded. Like, dang, just dogs myself.
I was like, wow, she's being
No,
so
no, no.
transparent.
I wasn't thinking.
It's like, you're giving out where you're from.
Let me mind my business.
All right. It's not like you're saying New York City and there are like a million people
Yeah.
Yeah.
here. And then you get lost in the crowd.
What I'm trying to say is, I think the education curriculum isn't set up to educate students, to teach them how to be learners, and it's not set up to support teachers, to teach them how to teach, and not only teach students but teach themselves how to grow as teachers. You're saying you said it's like you're one out of like 50 students. Shreya, you said it's 1 out of 50 students. For us, I feel like it's usually like 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30, something like that, in that average. And teachers aren't equipped with that. Like, they're not equipped to take on all these students who come in with their own problems. They're not just teachers, they're moms, they're social workers, they're friends, they're siblings. Like, they have to take on all these roles to take care of these kids. And like you said, like, they might not remember us, but like for us, that's our one teacher in sixth grade, our one science teacher, our one English teacher. And so I feel like the education curriculum needs to better equip us to take on these situations, both students and teachers. If we put ourselves in a situation where, if we create a system where it's made to support teachers and empower students, America would actually be unstoppable. The way that we say America is so great, blah, 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 we have so much wrong with our education system. And education, what bothers me the most is education is seen as a privilege, but education should just be a right. It should just be a basic human right that everyone has. But we use it as a privilege. We use it to leverage others. We use it to take over others, to abuse others, have power over them. And that's why the system we have is so messed up, where teachers are quitting, teachers don't get paid enough, students are dropping out, students don't want to go to college, students can't afford to go to college, because we have a system that's meant to abuse others, a system that's meant to belittle others and keep those in power in power. Keep those who are rich, make them richer. Like, we're not actually trying to support our students. We're not actually trying to support our teachers. And that's also like some of the bad teachers we have, like the bad experiences I've had, I kind of like think back and I'm just like, maybe they were just having a rough day. I can only imagine. I'm like the 300th student that came up to them asking them a question and they just weren't in the mood. Or maybe they had family issues. Maybe they're having a rough day. Like, they're physically not feeling well. They're sick. Like, I can only imagine, but we're just like, no, you're my teacher. Get it together. So sometimes I'm just like, if we just fix the education system and these social not stigmas, social like status quos we have about teachers and students and what a teacher should be and what a student should be, it would be better. Again, some teachers are just not meant to be teachers. Put it down. Put the pencil down, walk outside, go get another job. But there are some people who are good teachers but aren't given enough support to show how good of a teacher they are. So I wish we would just fix that part of the system. I don't know how yet. I have thoughts, but I don't know how. We just need to come together and do it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I feel that, see, one aspect is that I feel that teachers are not taught how to talk to children of a certain age. Or maybe they're taught they don't know how. I don't see any. Sometimes I look at teachers interacting with students and I'm like, you're a great instructor, right? The way you teach is really good. Like, I had my 10th grade math teacher. She was also my homeroom teacher or my class teacher. She hated me. She didn't know who I was. She thought I was someone else the entire year. Okay. She thought I was somebody else the entire year. I kid you not. So, but she was great at teaching us math. She was so passionate about it. Even though she thought I was a lost cause, she did not know my name. She thought I was someone else. She wanted me to succeed, or at least in the sense that she's like, I know you're a lost cause, but I will make you pass. However, that approach was, she didn't give up on me in that sense. She still pushed me to study harder. She put me in remedial classes, even though I didn't fail. She put me in remedial classes because she thought I was someone else, which is basically when you fail an exam, at least in the 10th grade, when you fail an exam, they put you in something called as remedial classes, which means that after school, you stay back for an hour or so, where you're taken to another place and you're taught the same thing again, dumbed down version of the same thing, and you're made to practice problems. The best thing that ever happened to me, honestly, because I loved that class. I was like, I get it. You're doing 2 into 2 equals to 4. I get it. It's dumb, but thank you. Because sometimes, especially when you're doing things like trigonometry, I don't like trig. It never entered my head. Like, I'll just understand one particular pattern, and then the next question is another pattern altogether. And I'm like, how am I supposed to intuitively do this? I don't get it. So if you dumb that down for me, it's great. Because I need that stuff to be dumbed down. Algebra, on the other hand, I can understand. I don't need you to dumb it down. But besides the dumbing down thing, treating students like they're idiots, I love that class because the teacher took time out of her day, out of her very busy packed day, to teach me how to calculate volume, and I don't know. So it was really nice. So I see teachers who, if they just modified the way they spoke to students and the way if they were more mindful of how their facial expressions are being, of their face, the way they talk, it would make that student's life in that particular stressful year so much easier, so much more supported. And I also feel bad for teachers because they're so overburdened and underpaid in India. Like, it's not, very few parents say that if your teacher is telling you to do this, you should do this. Don't answer back to them or don't be rude to them. I don't see that happening anymore. And I feel bad because they work a lot. They're under a lot of stress. Honestly, it doesn't seem fair. They're burning out. They would burn out. And students are sometimes the casualties of that.
That's a good way to put it.
You mentioned about... Sorry, go ahead.
No. So this teacher talking about, the 10th grade math teacher, honestly, when I look back at her, I know that she didn't think I would amount to anything. She said as much to my mother. Okay. But I still think of her fondly only because she made math fun for me. She made maths fun for me. Even if she thought I was a lost cause and I would not amount to anything. So during a parent-teacher meeting again, my poor mother, she's encountered such mean teachers during parent-teachers meetings, and she's been really nice about it so far. So we show up and there's this form that you need to fill up. So the teacher writes down your name, the date, and then she leaves a remark for your parent to fill up. So if your parent wants anything changed, or any remarks about how I've done this semester, or what she would like the teacher to focus on, and she goes and writes another name in block letters. And my mother looks at me, she's like, "Who's this?" And then the teacher's like, they're caught on the headlight. She's just looking and she's like, "I have no idea." And then I said my name. And then she was like, "Ah, okay." And then she scratched it out and then she wrote my name. My mother was glaring. My mother was so pissed off.
Dang.
As
she should be.
I was like, yes, I knew it. I knew you didn't know my name. I knew you thought I was someone else. For me, that felt like, sorry. What is that? What is a word when you feel like vindication? Like, I was vindicated that day. I was like, I knew. I kept telling everyone, nobody believed me. But yeah, anyway. Sorry, you were saying something, T.
It was finding it.
Sorry.
You said something about the lack of respect that like teachers get, and I also want to make the point, I feel like this is more so an American issue, but I think the expectations of teachers that people have, especially we look at all the school shootings that have happened recently, and the expectations for teachers are rising, and they don't get nearly enough respect, pay, and just support that they should have. And I've seen a lot of teachers throughout like my schooling. I started off in Montessori school, then I went to private school, then the public school, then back to private school, went to HBCU for undergrad, and then a PWI for grad school. And I've had so many great teachers, but just like the ability of what different teachers are able to do because of the resources, because of the class size, it's different. And the teachers deserve better, and also the students deserve like a more individualized approach. They deserve to be nurtured and supported in whatever way they can, but it's just not always feasible. And I think it, as Rose said, I don't know what can be done, but some reform in some way, shape, or form needs to happen.
On that note, what do you guys think is the best? Because obviously we don't really know how to fix the entire education system in America and India. Wish we could, but can't just the three of us do it. I mean, it would take years. No problems. Wow. But what forms of education do you guys prefer and why? Like, do you think there are different forms of education that need to be introduced? And this is what I mean. Like, for me, I learn best through people. Y'all know I'm a yapper. Y'all know I will start a conversation with anyone. Literally, put a person in front of me, I'll have a conversation. I don't care. I literally do not care. But I need to communicate with someone. I need to learn about their life story and their perceptions. Teach me math. I need to understand how I need to understand how T sees math. I need to understand how Shreya sees math so that I can understand how I see math. My dad always says, my problem is I'm an intellectual. I'm always saying why. I'm always asking so many questions. But it's the way I learn best. When I communicate with others, when I can process a lot of information. Give me all the information and then let me process it the best way I can. So if there was more classes that had to deal with so I think this is kind of combining two questions. So like my preferred method of education, but also what I would add to the education curriculum. I think there should be a class on culture. You know how the core subjects are math, science, history, English, or language arts? I think it should be 5 core classes and the 5th one should be culture. I think they try to do that with social studies and history, but history is a fact. You're kind of it's a fact of what happened. And as we know, winners write history. So sometimes the fact isn't even real. But if we had a class on culture, how to communicate with people, how to have these conversations, learning skills like conflict resolution, I think it would be a lot easier. It would kind of take a little bit of the burden off of like students not knowing how to learn or communicate or like understand themselves because you have a whole class dedicated to it. What are the different cultures in the world? What's your culture? How do you show up? What's your identity? What does intersectionality mean? How do you communicate with someone? What's a conflict resolution skill you need? Having a class like that, if I had that growing up, bro, I would have dominated. No one could touch me because I love learning through people. I love learning through experiences, whether it's like, not necessarily experiences. If I travel somewhere and I talk to someone new, if I'm out at a club and the person beside me, I'm just talking to them because I saw they have like a Clemson shirt on or they go to Spelman and I'm like, oh, how was that? And I'm asking questions and I'm getting to know them better. If I had that in school and I learned how to ask questions, I learned how to answer questions, how to actively listen, I feel like there were a lot of things that could have been avoided in my education experience if I had that. So, what about y'all? I know it's like two questions in one, but like, what's your best form of education? Like, what do you prefer? How do you learn best? And then based off of that, what would you add to the education curriculum to help?
I think I would prefer a combination of methods. I learn best through activities because I question a lot of things. Like, for example, I, for the life of me, couldn't study chemistry, especially in the 11th and 12th grade, because you're giving me these equations, you're giving me this P block. The P block elements do this, they behave this way. But why? Why do they behave this way? Why is this? That was never something that was answered, and I didn't like memorizing, so I struggled with that. Especially if you're taking the core subjects of science, math, at least elementary, basic education that everybody should have up until the 10th grade. I think experiments and activities, applications help best. So you first explain a concept in a way that a student who perhaps is not intuitively lined up to understand a textbook can understand, in the sense that you say it in a way that even someone who doesn't naturally instinctively understand what you understand the concept will be able to say, okay, I think I get what you're saying. And then you have us do experiments and activities, which I think is supposed to be a part of the curriculum anyway, but because of time and resources and just generally the sheer number of students, it's not possible for teachers to do this all the time. If they do that, they'll end up taking so much time to finish one particular chapter that they won't have time to finish the rest of the syllabus. So I understand why it's not that way, but encouraging experimentation, activities, applications of what you're learning is something that I would have appreciated, at least for the core subjects. With English, I think it's taught in the worst way possible in schools, because there is this one way to interpret things correctly. There is this one way of saying it. There is this one correct way of thinking about things. And I mean, that's not necessarily true, because nobody except the poet knows what they actually meant by that particular poem. And you need to allow students to think and interpret things in the way they do, because that's how it works. That's how art works. What does it mean to you? Yes, to a certain extent, you need to help them understand that this is one way of analyzing the text. But I hated English in school. I was terrible at it up until the 12th grade. The 10th, 11th grade, things started changing because it became more, oh, this is a novel, read this novel, we're going to be tested on this. That was easier. So yeah, that needs to change. You're making a student hate the subject. That's like, English is beautiful. Why would you make someone hate it by making it so rigid? It's not math. There's no formula to it. So if I had to add something to the education system in India, I think one would be a more application-based study method that's not based on rote learning. You don't realize how rote learning-based education is in India. Like, you even have people memorizing answers to maths. So it needs to change to a more application-based, where you're helping people think. So that's something that I would emphasize on. And the second, that I have to come up with this statement that my experience is from an upper middle class person in India. It does not by any way reflect struggles that students who go to government schools, struggles of the people who go to government schools. Government schools are underfunded, and they have broken chairs and tables. Some of them don't have chairs and tables, and they're not exactly to the standard that they should be in the 21st century in India. Their struggles would be things like getting resources, getting textbooks, not being discriminated based on caste or gender. Those would be their struggles. And I've seen schools where those struggles exist. There's just far too much that needs to be changed. One of them, interesting, I'm rambling, but this is the last one. One of them is that a lot of government schools, which were really good back in the day, like my father studied in a government school. I think my mother did as well. My grandparents did as well. And they had the best teachers who really invested in making sure their students, they were like my math teacher. You know, the one who thought I was someone else, but really was passionate about her subject. They were like her. And they really made sure that all these kids would move along. But slowly, the ministers, ministers who were involved in education in India also ended up opening up private schools. So there was this entire thing about defunding government schools so that public schools get more students. So the parents who could afford a private education send their kids to private education. And the teachers who basically only the leftovers of that system went into the government school education system. So the quality of teachers has gone down. Not all of them are bad, but the quality has gone down. They're not paid well enough. And all the societal evils are stuck in that system now, at least in the lower village and small town schools, which has to change. So, yeah, that's it. Sorry. Also, the thing about you saying that an extra class for culture and experiences sounds like a great idea. But knowing the Indian education system, you'll end up having a maths teacher or a science teacher or a physics teacher coming and taking that class up saying, oh, I have this much syllabus left over. You're just teaching like an extra subject. So it's mine now. And the student might be lucky to end up having 1 or 2 classes the entire semester.
Sounds like America. Some parts of America. Not all. But yeah.
I think it depends on the subject for me. I learn in different ways, but generally the one thing that is kind of similar throughout, I'm a very visual learner. I don't learn if someone's just talking at me. And I get frustrated when there's teachers who are very rigid in the way that they teach, because I feel like, yes, you have the expertise, you know, you've been doing this for a few years normally, but the purpose should be to really want your kids to like succeed and learn and take in the information the way that they can do best. So that's sometimes experiences that are very like hindering. But for the most part, visual learner, I do like hands-on activities because I think it just sinks in a little bit better when you're actually hands-on doing something. It's something very different when you're just reading and writing notes versus, oh, I'm touching, I'm seeing, I'm experiencing it and taking it in through different senses. But I think in general, there needs to be, from a society standpoint, acceptance of like different ways of learning, because there's no right way. There's no one way to do something. I think the path of, you go through high school, you graduate, you go to college, that's like so like seen as that's the thing you do. Like that's the traditional route to go about it. But there's so many other great alternatives. I don't think college is necessary for everyone. There's trade school, there's vocational. People start in on what they want to do early and then they can immediately start working. And I think that shift is important because the way that college is even priced nowadays, for some people, they don't need to go in debt for information they're not going to use realistically. I will say, especially because of the way the society is built and like even job descriptions, you need a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Like there's so many where you just need it. I do think you need to understand what you're trying to do. I think you have to have a plan because society is stacked to favor college grads. You know what I mean? But I also think it's safe if you don't know what you're going to do, if you don't want to do one of these trade things. Of course, not everyone has the financial means. That's different, understandable. I think college is a good safety net because you can always go and get an education degree. You can go and get a business degree, and there's so much you can do with that. But I do think as a society, there needs to be a shift to recognize other ways about going through things, like, because read Rose's article about success when it comes out. But there's different measures of success, and people achieve that and attain that in different ways. There's society's idea of success, but then there's also just, personal success. Some people are content creators. They are very successful in their own rights. They do what they want to do. And not all of them needed to go to college. Some of them did, but it's like it really varies. So I just think that's a shift in society. Now, in terms of curriculum, things that I think should be added, I graduated high school not knowing how to pay bills, about simple things like what's a FAFSA, taxes.
Taxes, laws,
Why
basic
don't we learn
laws.
this? You're
You
18 most of the times when you graduate high school. We're adults. By the law, we are recognized as adults. We need to be taught how to do certain things. We're going off on our own. College is great, but like you're away from your parents. There's just certain things you need to know. And I know some schools, I'm talking loud, I'm sorry. Dial it back. I know some schools will provide the classes and courses for that. Like at the end of my senior year high school, we had in math class, it was statistics and personal finance. The last like 2 weeks was personal finance. Needed more because I walked away like, cool, I get credit, but I also don't at the same time. But that needs to be something mandated. Like I feel like it's skills that everyone is gonna need. But if you don't have like a parent who can be like, oh yeah, this is how you do it, or just someone who's there to support you, you have to figure it out on your own, and it's tough sometimes. So I feel like that's something that should be
No,
added.
I wholeheartedly agree to that because we.
Oh my God.
Oh, I don't know if she froze. Were you saying something?
No, no, no. I'm with you guys. I'm listening.
We had so my A push class. It was A push and civics and economics. That was our taxes finance class. So you could either take American
Mm.
history 1 and 2, and then civics and economics. Those were 3 different classes, or you could take A push and civics and economics together for a whole year. And so I remember we started learning about civics and economics. There was 4 quarters in the year. We started learning about it like quarter 4, maybe 3 or 4. I remember he started teaching about it. I was like, why aren't we talking about assassinations and constitutions? Like, what's going on? I completely forgot it was part of the class. And I can't tell you what I learned. I literally can't tell you what I learned. I have no idea what we talked about when it came to civics and economics. But a lot of people did that because it was just the easiest way to get the credit. My sister said something in her college essay that she just wrote. It was really good, but it's based off her experience. She said an A has moved from, I'm gonna quote her, but not quote her. She said an A is basically a mark of completion now rather than a representation of the hard work that you've done. And so I feel like at a certain point, when it comes to civics, economics, finances, like stuff like that, it's just a mark of completion. Like it's mandated. We say it's mandated. You have to take this class, but they're just like, just pass. Like no one cares. You'll learn that as you go. I had to learn how as I go. You learn how you go, or as you go. Like it just, I think that's how it's kind of what it's become, especially because with taxes, like we can talk about this another day, but a lot of rich people, like there's some secrets with taxes and they playing us, but they don't really want us to understand that at a young age. They don't want everyone to have access to that information, which again, why I said people use education and say it's a privilege when really education is a right because we want to hold power over others. But if we just teach ourselves these things, if we teach other people these things, if we change the curriculum and system, then we'll be able to balance the playing field a bit. There's still other things at play, but at least with education, it's a really big leg up if we can balance it out.
Knowledge is power.
Well, we're at an hour and 5 minutes, but that was a great conversation, guys. We're at time.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do like an education part 2 or something, because I can go on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much to talk about.
I think education's a great topic, honestly.
We're talking about reality TV next week.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, reality TV. So let's look into that.
Okay, reality TV. So sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, let's just end the recording. Okay.
Bye, guys. Bye.